Well, hello. In the last video, I made this medieval tower. If you missed it, you can find it up there in the card section or down below in the video description. Thank you for all your ideas about how we move on with this creation in this video. Let's start with the base and start the layout of this part of the build. I decided to set this build on a 30 by 45 cm base, which happens to be the exact size of this cutting mat. Maybe one day I'll add another section next to it, but for now this will do. To start, I grabbed a sheet of plywood and cut out the mentioned 30 by 45 cm piece. Then to cover it up, I cut a 2 cm thick sheet of styrofoam in the same size. The only thing I knew for sure was where to put the tower, so I placed it on the base and let my imagination take over. At first I planned to have a house next to the tower, something like a stable. Then I changed my mind, like I always do. Originally I wanted a deep ravine running right through the middle of the diorama, but then I realized, yeah, that was a terrible idea. To make that work, I'd need to stack a lot more foam sheets and raise everything higher. And that would just make the whole diorama way taller than it needs to be. I also thought about turning the ravine into a river or a pond, but I ran out of epoxy resin and honestly I didn't care enough to buy more. That stuff is crazy expensive these days. Looking at it now though, it would have been cool to cut the base edges so it's not just perfect rectangle with sharp corners. Since I don't plan to put this in a plexiglass case, I might still do that before giving the base its final shape. Anyway, to elevate the tower area, I cut out some extra foam pieces and hot glued them in place. Then I glued the rest of the foam onto the plywood sheet and called the base down for now. To build the house, I used some leftover foam core scraps that had been sitting in my drawer like forever. And for a bit of fun, I used half a toilet paper roll to make a semi-cylindrical tower extension, if you know what I mean. The whole building was pretty much eyeballed, except for the height. The area next to the tower was a bit deformed, so I just followed that shape, making sure the house wasn't too small next to the tower. Still, it felt a little undersized, so I added a second floor. To make the top part interesting, I gave it a slanted roof. And for no real reason other than adding detail, I decided to include a roof terrace, which later turned into a mini battlement, kind of like the one on the tower. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to put a defensive wall on what's supposed to be a civilian building, but hey, I'm just building this as I go. The roofing turned into a nightmare because of that weird slanted angle on the far left side. I mismeasured the cardboard piece for that section and had to bend and fight with it until it finally fit. I added more foam core to the top to prep for the battlements later. While dry fitting the house next to the tower, I noticed a gap between the far side of the house and the tower's rock face. To fill it, I built a smokestack section out of foam core. Then came the lumber detailing, same as on the tower. I could have added more angled beams, but honestly I got lazy. That part just makes the stonework take forever. I added copy stairs as roof separators. They hide gaps at the edges and add nice detail across the middle. For the doors and windows, I made them the usual way using stairs and cardboard. I even used another toilet paper roll to make a tiny roof over the attic window. Nothing goes to waste here. The shingles were cut from cardboard, so many that my scissors went dull. I glued the first row down with PVA glue, then switched to CA glue for the rest. You know the drill by now. Although I'd be happy if I hadn't knocked it over twice. One time I dropped the entire unglued shingle setup. It felt just like tripping over your dominoes before finishing. Being disappointed doesn't even cover it. Unlike the tower, I wanted this building to have a wooden top floor, just to add a little contrast. So I started laying down copy stairs until I suddenly realized, wait, what? How are they supposed to get up here from inside? I stopped mid-flow and quickly built a wooden hatch, just like the one I made for the tower. Then I laid down the stonework brick by brick. The smokestack didn't turn out great. I rushed it and it shows. The top section is kind of uneven and thrown together. But hey, from outside, it's still in scale with the figures. Thinking about how they would haul supplies up to the tower, I decided to make a simple crane. I actually made one years ago in my first medieval diorama, so this was a new territory for me. If you haven't seen that video, it's a 3-part series and you can find it in the playlist up there on your screen. For this crane, I used the usual stuff, sticks and cardboard. I wanted it to look like it's sitting on a turntable style platform. The rest, honestly, it's hard to describe. It's not an engineering marvel or anything. I just kept adding bits and sticks wherever it felt right. The hardest part was adding the thread for the rope. It either sticks to the glue on my fingers, comes loose, or worst of all, needs to be glued while being pulled tight. That was the mistake I made with my first crane. The rope didn't look like gravity was pulling it down, so to say. So it just looked wrong. At this time, I glued it carefully at the contact points on the crane arm, and it worked fine, or at least better than last time. Once I was happy with it, I glued the whole crane to its platform. While checking how the crane looked on the tower, I decided to fill the empty space above the main gate with a banner. Using a chopstick piece, a skewer and some toothpicks, I built a little stand for the banner to hang from. After dry fitting, I glued everything together. For the banner itself, I used air dry clay. It's just easier to work with than trying to use cloth or dried baby wipes. While I was at it, I also made a flag for the taller tower's pole, and checked that detail off the list. Next, I wanted a marketplace scene in front of the tower. With my usual materials, I started making vendor stands. Since I plan to add villagers and civilians later, and there is already a crane loading supplies, it made sense that some market activity would be happening here. I really liked how these stands turned out, and I'd honestly recommend you try making your own. Just be warned, there's so much of my skin glued to these things. After finishing the stands, I made a couple of wheeled carts for extra scatter. They are easy to make except the wheels, of course. Then I built a horse-drawn carriage in a parked position. Back to the clay. I sculpted some vegetables for the vendor tables. At this scale, there's not much shape variety, just tiny round balls, some watermelon-like pieces, a few wormy bread-looking ones, I don't know how to describe it, and some thin bits for greens. Oh, and a few sack shapes for grains. Loaded them all up, glued them down, and called it done. Let's take a look at where we are so far. The base positioning is mostly settled by now. I've decided to change my mind about the ravine or creek idea, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll be smoothing the edges here and there to create a more blended terrain. I'll also need to add more rocks so the terrain better matches the tower itself. Once the base is completely finished, I'll trim the corners. I'm sure it will look much better that way. The house and the rest of the scatter items are already done. In the next video, I'll be resin printing the necessary figures, selecting the soldier figures from my stock, painting everything, making some trees, and completing the scene. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and I'll see you soon in the next one.